This Photoshop tutorial creates kaleidoscope designs while exploring transforming, layer basics, and saving. We'll create 2 new kaleidoscope designs using different selection methods. We'll create new documents, copy and paste selections, make guides, use the Move tool, name our layers, duplicate our layers, and transform and rotate our layers. We'll also talk about different formats that we can save our documents in. I'd also like to highlight the Photoshop Learn and Support website. There are different tutorials that are available for beginner through experience based on different topics, and you can also go to the user guide and narrow down your topic on the left sidebar and then find more specific information in here. It's always current, free, and available to everyone. So I recommend bookmarking the Photoshop Learn and Support web pages. We'll start off this project by creating a couple of new documents in Photoshop. I'll go up to File, New. We'll set our unit of measurements to inches, and for the first document we'll make it 4 inches wide by 4 inches high. It'll be a perfect square. And we'll make the resolution 300 pixels per inch. That's standard high quality resolution. And that's all we need to change. We'll hit the blue Create button. We'll be using this as a temporary document, so there's no need to save or name this file. We'll create another new document by going up to File, New. We'll keep our unit of measurement set to inches, and this one will make it 8 inches wide by 8 inches high. We'll keep the resolution at 300 pixels per inch and click the Create button. This will be the document that we'll be designing our first project on today. If you don't see rulers showing up on the left and top portions of your workspace, you can go up to the View menu, Rulers. So you would make sure that there's a check mark next to it, and then it should appear. I'll go up to my Move tool at the very top of my toolbar. V on your keyboard will also take you there. And we're going to put some guides down on our document to help us with the layout. To pull a guide down, you're going to go into the ruler area. I'll click and hold my mouse key down, and first I'll drag down a line to 4 inches on the y-axis. Next I'll go over to the ruler on the left side, click and hold my mouse down, and then drag another guide to 4 inches on the x-axis. We want to make sure that our layers are snapping into our placements exactly where we need them. So one way that we can help ourselves out a little bit is by going up to the View menu and making sure that there's a check mark next to the word Snap. And that will help snap guides and layers and different items to, maybe a guide or the document boundaries. So it will help us out with that placement. We need to save this document. We'll go up to File, Save As, navigate into your Adobe Design Suite folder, and we'll make a new folder for this lab titled Lab 07 dash PS stands for Photoshop dash transform. Double click to open that new folder. And we're going to create a document that has multiple layers. And we want to preserve those layers. So we need to choose a format that does accept those layers and will preserve them. So a good option would be the Photoshop format .psd. Another option that's equivalent to a PSD format would be a TIFF. And a TIFF would be a more universal format. But both of those are going to preserve all of our Photoshop editing capabilities and layers. So I'll keep that Photoshop.psd extension and I'll highlight Untitled. I want you to put in your last name. Dash 07 dash PS dash transform dot PSD. Click the Save button. So now we've created two documents. There's an untitled one, that's my 4" by 4" document, and then the 8" by 8" document that we just named and saved. Next, we'll open up an image from our photo library. Let's go up to File, Open, navigate back into your Adobe Design Suite folder, and then into your photo library. Select an image and click Open. I chose a picture of the Chicago skyline, and now we have 3 tabs open. Using my Move tool, V on my keyboard, I'll go up to the Select menu and choose All. And now I see an active selection around my document. I also call them the marching ants. Now everything inside of that selection we can transform or copy, and that's what we'll be doing. We'll copy this selection and paste it into one of the other tabs that we created. Before I do that, I just want to take a look at this document and its layers. This is a JPEG format, which is what most cameras are going to shoot their pictures in. JPEGs only support one layer. So if I look at my layers panel in the lower right portion of my workspace, I can see that there's a single background layer and it's locked. And that tells me that it's a flattened single layer document. Let's copy our selection by going up to Edit, Copy, and I'll click back on the first tab of the 4" by 4" document that we created, and I can go up to the Edit menu and select Paste. Now, more than likely your image is going to be much bigger than this canvas size, and that's okay. We're going to transform and scale it down, but you still might end up with cropped areas since this is a square format canvas too. If I take a look at my layers panel, I can see I now in this document have an additional layer. That's layer 1. So it started off with a single background layer. It was just a white canvas, and then we pasted this image in. It automatically created a new layer. I could click that eyeball to hide or show layers, but I do want to have layer 1 selected, and we'll transform this layer. To transform, we're going up to our Edit menu, and you could go down to Free Transform. I could also go down to Transform if there was a specific command I wanted to apply, but for now I'll go to Free Transform, and I'll zoom out a bit because that is actually the bounding box of my image. I could click and I could reposition it in there. But a lot of times, if you're zoomed in very close on your canvas, you might not even see that entire bounding box. So you would need to zoom out. When in transform mode, we can do things like scaling, rotating, or flipping our image. If I go to one of the corner handles and I start dragging it, right now I can see that I'm distorting my image. I'm squishing it or pulling it. But if I add my Shift key in, that's going to constrain my proportions. You can also apply that by looking up in your options bar in the top, and there's a link between your width and your height. If that link is selected, it's going to constrain your proportions, and there will be no distortion applied. So just keep an eye out for that, because if that is on, then I don't need to use my Shift key to keep it proportional. Go ahead and position your picture however you would like it inside of this square. And like I said, you're more than likely going to be cropping off a bunch of areas. If you want to distort your image to fit more in there, you can do that too. So you're the designer, you can make that decision, but I do want the image to fully extend to all the boundaries of this canvas. When you're in transform mode, it kind of locks you in that mode until you tell it to apply that transformation or discard those changes. I can see up in my options bar I have a check mark that will apply the transform or the cancel to cancel that transformation. I could also click my enter key. That applies my transformation. I'll zoom in a little bit. And because this is on its own separate layer, if I wanted to reposition it, I could still do that. So the areas that got cropped out are still there. They're just hiding. So we have filled our image with our picture, and I'm on my Move tool. We're ready to copy this canvas. I had a change of plans and chose a different image to use. I thought that this one might give me some more interesting shapes and textures for this project. But I went through the same steps. This is my original, Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm on my Move tool. I'll go up to the Select menu, select all. Go up to the Edit menu, copy. Navigate to the 8 by 8 inch document with the 4 quadrants and go up to the Edit menu and paste. Let's save the document. File, Save. And using my Move tool, I can drag that image up into the upper left quadrant. I can see the new layer that it's on. Mine says Layer 1, and we can rename this layer. I'll double click right on the word Layer 1 and rename it Top left. Save the document, File, Save. And in the Layers panel, I have the top left layer selected, and I'll locate the hamburger drop-down menu in the Layers panel. And I'll tell it to duplicate layer. I can name this new one Top Right. Click OK. And it duplicates it in the same exact spot. I have that new layer selected, so I'll just click and drag over to the right, save the document. Now we'll flip the top right image horizontally. We can go up to the Edit menu, down to Transform, Flip Horizontal. And they should be right up next to each other, and it should be a mirrored image. Save the document. In my Layers panel, I have the top right layer selected. I'll hold my Shift key down and select the top left layer. Now I have both of them selected, and I can duplicate both layers. I'll go to the hamburger drop-down menu in my Layers panel and tell it to duplicate layers. It won't let me rename multiple layers. I'll click OK. And now I can drag those two new layers down to the bottom quadrants, and I can transform and flip those vertically. So I'll go up to the Edit menu, Transform, Flip Vertical. And again, I can hide my guides to see the picture. And I'll rename those two new layers. So it'll be bottom right and bottom left. Save the document. For our next part of this project, we'll rename this document. Go up to File, Save As. It should take you back to folder Lab number 7, Photoshop Transform. And I'm going to keep the same file name, but I'll put my cursor after the word transform, and I'll put 2. I'll keep it a Photoshop PSD and click Save. Right now, my document has 5 layers. What we'll do is flatten this image and then take a selection of the flattened layers together. I'll go to the hamburger drop-down menu in the Layers panel and select Flatten Image. Now I have one single background layer. It's locked, and I can no longer edit these squares independently. It's all flattened into one single image. We'll save the document, File, Save. If you click L as in lasso on your keyboard, that'll bring you to your set of lasso tools. When you're looking at the toolbar, you'll notice that some tools have an additional arrow in the lower right-hand corner. If you click and hold that tool down, it will reveal additional hidden tools. For this next step, we're going to use the Polygonal Lasso tool. And that creates straight-edged selections. But before we make our selection, I'd like to add a couple more guides that I find help this project along a little bit. If you're new to the tools, your zoom tool is located at the bottom of your toolbar, Z on your keyboard. And this is one way that we can zoom in. But I'll go to the upper left corner, and I'm just clicking and dragging my mouse to the right and down a little bit. If I wanted to zoom out, I would move my mouse up and to the left a little bit. But that's good. And then I can also hold my space bar down. That gives me the hand temporarily, and I can navigate around my workspace this way. So I release the space bar and I'm back to the zoom tool. I can go to the move tool now, and I'll go to the top ruler, click and hold my mouse key down, and then drag down a guide at 0 inches on the y-axis. Now I'll go to the ruler on the left side, click inside the ruler and hold my mouse down and drag to the 0-inch x-axis. Now I'll scroll. I'm using the scroll bar at the bottom right now, and I'll scroll all the way to the upper right hand corner. So I don't need to put another guide down horizontally, but I do need to put another vertical guide at 8 inches on the x-axis. View Fit on Screen brings my entire document back. And now we can go back to the Polygonal Lasso tool. I'll start in the upper left corner, and I'll click once and release. And I see I have a line attached to my cursor now. I'll go to the center intersection of the guides, and I'll click once and release. Up to the upper right hand corner, click and release. And then when you get back to the starting point, you'll see an additional hollow circle appear next to your cursor. And that tells us it's about to close the selection. So I'll click once. And now I see I have an active selection. Go back to the Move tool. And we need to copy this selection up to Edit, Copy. And I can now deselect by going to the Select menu and then choosing Deselect. And now we can paste that selection in, but we want it to be pasted in the exact same spot. So I'll go up to the Edit menu, down to Paste Special, Paste in Place. Now it doesn't really look like anything's there, but I can see in my Layers panel I have an additional layer in there now. And what I'll do is just hide the background layer. Now I see this gray and white grid in the background. That indicates transparency. Nothing is there. We can rename layer 1 by double clicking on the word layer 1, and I'll rename it top. Let's save the document. File, save. And I could go to my Layers panel drop-down menu and duplicate the top layer. I can rename this new layer Right. Click OK. So it duplicated that layer in exactly the same spot. Now we'll transform it and rotate it. Using the Move tool, I'll go up to the Edit menu, down to Transform, Rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And I can drag that new layer and it should snap into position. But what I like to do is zoom in really close. I still have the right layer selected, and I can see just a little bit of a line separating my layers. So I'll zoom in a little bit more. Sometimes I'll just nudge it with my arrow keys on my keyboard. So I still want to make sure that it's pretty lined up diagonally, but now I don't see that separation line anymore. And I might need to give it one more nudge. That looks better. Save the document. I'll select both the right and top layers. Hold down my Shift key to select them both. Go to the Layers panel drop-down menu and select Duplicate Layers. Click OK. Both of those new layers are selected. I'll go up to the Edit menu, Transform, Rotate 180 degrees. You can zoom in if you want to check your positioning. If you'd like to hide your guides, you can go up to the View menu, Show, Guides, and that will hide them. I'll rename these two new layers, so you can always use the eyeball to the left of the layer to hide and show. I know that one is the left layer, and this one is going to be the bottom layer. Save the document. Because I did have to nudge my layers a little bit, I'll zoom in. For my document, it's the lower left corner. I can see a little bit of the transparency grid. So I'm just going to crop that off. C, as in crop, on your keyboard will take you to your crop tool, and the bounding box will appear. I can hover over the bottom line and just drag that up a touch. And same with this left side. And I'll apply that cropping and save the document. It looks like I could use a little bit of cropping on the right side, so I can go back to my crop tool and I'll I'll zoom in on the right side center area. You can hover over that line and drag it to the edge of my image and apply the crop. Save the document. Right now we have a multi-layered document. If we wanted a more universal file that we could share or maybe use on the web, a JPEG would be a good option. So we'll make a copy of this file as a JPEG by going up to the File menu, Save As. I'll keep this new file in folder Lab number 7, Photoshop Transform, and I'll keep the name the same, but I'll change the format to a JPEG. And even though it has the same name as a previous file, because they have different file extensions, it won't override that file. I'll click Save, and I'll make sure that the quality is set to 12 maximum for my JPEG options. Click OK. And it still keeps my Photoshop PSD tab open, but we'll check out that JPEG by going to File, Open. And it brought me to folder Lab 7, Photoshop Transform, and I'll select the JPEG and click Open. Now, if I look at my layers panel, it's just one single background layer. So we'll close these tabs, and the 4x4 one you can save if you'd like. I don't need that file, so I'll click No. Open up your folders on your desktop and navigate into folder Lab number 7, Photoshop Transform. I have 3 documents, and I have 2 PSDs, and the last one is a JPEG. You can take a look at the size of the documents, the JPEG versus the PSD that has all the layers. You'll compress and zip these 3 documents for submission. I'll select them all and zip, compress them. On a PC, I can tell it send to compressed zip folder. Mac, you can just right click and compress the file. You can keep it named your last name -07 -ps transform.zip, and that will be the file that you submit to Canvas. In summary, we took an original image and we cropped it down to a 4" by 4" size with 300 resolution. We then made selections, copied over to a new document, transformed the layers by flipping them and rotating them. We applied layer management by renaming our layers. We also flattened the layers so that we could use our Polygonal Lasso tool to create a single selection of our multiple layers. And we created a different kaleidoscope design using that selection. We talked about how we can save our Photoshop documents while preserving the layers, and we also saved one version of the second document as a JPEG, which is a flattened compressed file, then zipped and compressed the 3 documents, the 2 Photoshop and the 1 JPEG files, and that is what will be submitted to Canvas. Thank you for watching.